And this time we're going old school. I don't know if people still do this, but we're gonna do a video response. And it's on a video of Urban Prepper that just did recently on a contained in room. So I wanted to give the healthcare professional perspective, and you'll see some part of his videos. I contacted him; he's okay with me using them. So let's put our Urban Prepper kit and let's get to it. Contained room. And I read the comments and also some of the part of the video. So the video will be in three parts. The first part will be the clarification of the video. The second part was what would I add to his kit, because he said he wanted to open a conversation, so that's what I'm doing. And the third part is I'll show you my kit that I made, which is pretty much similar to his. So the first thing I wanted to bring before I start with the videos was, in one of the comments, people was like, why do you need this? And I think they see just a perspective of when he was talking about chemicals and disasters and nuclear weapons. But here's a picture of my balcony right now, and what you can see there is that it's the port, and I'm on the North Shore. But I think a year and a half ago, on the North Shore, on the South Shore, they had a fire in the port, and obviously, you know, who knows what goes through a port, and they put an advisory of closing all windows, so people staying in and closing yourself. So sometimes those rooms, I would disagree that they're not needed. First of all, I believe they're, from a healthcare professional too, they would be required and needed. And two, sometimes it's not so much about putting someone in there, but it's keeping stuff outside of things. And for example, for me, this kit, if I would have had this repository as like close all windows and shut it down, that room could have been my buffer between whatever was happening outside and me staying clear inside the room. So I think it is a needed thing, and I think sometimes people don't see that perspective. We can always think about the big disaster, but there is smaller disaster where the end doesn't finish all the time, but we still need to be safe. So that was my first thing that I wanted to bring on. So let's go with the first video.
Of this particular video is to show you how you can contain a person using some plastic sheeting, for example, in a pandemic scenario, for CBRN protection.
Like to do is on the difference between biohazards, so biological hazards, and chemical hazards. In that category enters nuclear weapons and all the other stuff. And why is it important to make a clarification? Because how you treat or how you protect yourself is different, and the treatment is different. What I mean is that if you touch a chemical X, whatever it is, if you wash your hands with gel, you won't kill it. You cannot kill chemicals. So the treatment for chemicals, and you'll see the text here, the solution to pollution is dilution. So what does that mean? Is that a chemical becomes dangerous at a certain concentration. We have chemicals all around ourselves. We take some, we eat it, there's some on our counters, we encounter everywhere. It's the concentration that it makes it dangerous. So some are more dangerous, some are less dangerous, but what you want to do is decrease. So anytime they're dangerous is to decrease the concentration by dilution, meaning water is the solution. You take showers, you clean yourself, and even most of them you don't need to use soap or everything, because a big category of them are not soluble, so they'll be diluted with the water, but they don't need any, they don't have like a grease component to it. So for example, bear spray or pepper spray or the whole category, those ones a lot of time dilution won't work a lot, and so you need a soap. And in my second part, I'll talk about what you should have. But if you put alcohol on a pepper spray, it won't work. It's dilution. So that means you need to have access to a lot of water. Second is that biohazards. If you put tons of water, let's say I have the flu, I can take all the shower in the well. Yes, it will clear some of the whatever I'm producing on me, but if it's inside me, so let's say I take a sneeze and I wash my hands, sure, my hands are clean, but the next sneeze I have it again. So that's why I need to clean it all. But if I clean my hands with alcohol, germ is killed. I sneeze in my hands, clean it, it gets killed. So what I'm trying to say is that water will work in one condition, but not on the other side. So when you're treating this, you have to understand, am I dealing with a biohazard? So that means bacteria, virus, there's other categories, but those are the two main ones that you may encounter. Or I'm having chemicals, because chemicals you'll need water. And also in a chemical, the advantage is that just by taking your clothes, if you remove them carefully, 80% of the contamination start by taking off your clothes. 80%. So that means if I have somebody with disease X, so that's a biohazard, if they take their clothes, it doesn't matter, they still have it, they can still produce it, especially if they produce things like droplets or things, they're continuously a reservoir. But if I get sprayed with something, let's say bear spray again, and I take off my clothes, 80% of the contamination that I have is in my clothes, not on me. So that one, I'm less of a reservoir. So instead of being 100% of a reservoir, now I'm maybe 20% a reservoir. I take a shower, I'm pretty much down to zero. You do the same thing again with the flu, influenza. That doesn't happen. You're still a reservoir and you're still able to produce. So that's an important distinction to make, the first one, because especially with those rooms, it's important to understand when you go in or out how to treat this. And alcohol won't work for chemicals, but water will. And for biohazards, is washing hands, and most of the time, 80% of it is washing hands, and make sure that whatever you're touching, it doesn't get into contact, so that you cannot spray it all over.
Added pressure gradients for these type of rooms, such as Class S for standard, Class N for negative, Class P for positive, and Class Q for
clarification is rooms with pressure or negative pressure and all that. First of all, it's rare in condition that you need positive. So mostly what you need is negative, meaning that what happens is it creates a vacuum. So if you open the door, the stuff that you have doesn't go outside, it stays within the content of the room. In medicine, we sometimes use it. A lot of the time, we like, if you're in a place like an emergency and stuff, we don't have it. It's very expensive to have those rooms. So I wouldn't bother so much to determine if I can have. I've read and seen videos in the past of, for example, use a sample, like a do-it-yourself kind of situation. What you could do is having a fan, but instead of you know how a fan kind of blows wind into you? Well, it draws the air from the back to push it towards you. So what you do is you use the fan the opposite way. So what you do is the fan pushing the air, you try to push it outside. It would create a little bit of negative. I don't know how much it would drains, but it wouldn't do much. The only two things I would clarify on this one, especially if you have something like airborne, and then if you have airborne, you have way more problems than anything else. One is make sure that your room is ventilated as well, because if there's too much, so the reason that we isolate people is they become what we call a reservoir. So that means that if you touch them or something, you can give the disease or whatever they have to someone else. And so this is why we want them to be contained, is so that they don't become a reservoir. And so if I'm, especially droplets or airborne is the most important contact, you would need that. You would, if you contain pretty much within the area, and you kind of have a good circulation, then you wouldn't need to have the room. But if you have ventilation, you make sure that the air doesn't, like let's say you have an open door and now the fresh air, especially airborne droplets, not so much, but airborne, it would go through. So really the only issue that you would have if the disease is airborne, and for to know if something is airborne or droplets or contact, CDC has a list of those things, and you can go, and I'll put a link down of things you can buy and not download, but you can download and kind of know what you're doing. But if actually the best way would be, and this is another recommendation I'll do in the second part, but to have a second room, you could cut a lot of that cross contamination between a room and another room. Also, let's say before somebody goes inside the room, having windows that you could open and circulate the air close. So basically the person that is inside, if he's not too sick and able to do stuff, could open windows. You clear the room, close the windows, then the provider could go inside. It could create, but I wouldn't try to clarify because you need, the room has to be sealed a lot. Like some of the doors, like they're completely sealed, and if there's any break in this when we use negative room, the alarm goes and stuff. Then you have to have the big suction to pull all the air out, and then the filter. So almost impossible to do in DUI situation. Really, if you contain, and that would be again just for airborne, if you contain with a 2-door system, you probably would be able to get away very easily. And then if you create once in a while a circulation of air, and you throw it, obviously not in, so if, let's say you're on the side of the house and there's another room or something else that the next window, then you would throw whatever contamination to the other person, the other room, or the next thing. So again, dilution can help a little bit in the air, but you make sure that the air that circulates doesn't circulate to another position.